Welcome to Grow Them Right, podcast where we discuss how to prevent health issues from infancy. I'm Dr. Roche, a dentist and a mother of two. As a dentist, my expertise are in oral health, and I'm committed to continuing education. I also have a keen interest in preventative health. So in this podcast, I ask questions of experts, explore their insights, and discuss practical tips on how we can help our children grow healthy and strong right from the start. The whole idea for this podcast is to elevate the conversation and allow you, the listener, to make more informed decisions. I need to emphasize that these podcasts are not a substitute for medical advice. If you have any specific health concerns for you or your loved ones, please speak to your own medical professionals. I hope you find this space useful. And if you do, please take a second to subscribe and share with your friends. And together, let's grow them right. Accidents are part of growing up, but sometimes a fun, playful day can turn into a devastating event if you're not careful. To discuss this, I'm joined by Dr. Michael E. Dr. E is a pediatric surgeon and a core trauma director of the Major Trauma Services of Women and Children's Hospital, and he has taken time out of his very busy schedule to discuss with us how we can prevent trauma and lessen the risks of accidents that can have lifetime implications. Thank you so much, Michael, for your time here. I know that you're very busy and you were on call last night and with many phone calls, and you still made it to this session. So thank you so much. To start with, can you tell us a little bit about what you do, what your background is, and what's your daily activities look like?
Sure. Thanks, Rosh, for the opportunity and invitation to do this podcast. Delighted to be here, regardless of what happened overnight. I'm a pediatric surgeon working at both Women's and Children's Hospital and Flinders Medical Centre here in South Australia. I'm also the core trauma director of the Pediatric Major Trauma Service at the Health Network. And we cover a wide area, not just the whole state, including Northern Territory, Mildura, and also Broken Hills. We look after children up to 16 who sustain major trauma coming into the hospital, and a lot of all these children end up spending considerable amount of time in the hospital because of the extent of the injury that they've sustained.
I know that you've been tireless in raising awareness about prevention of major trauma and injuries in children, and that's the topic that I'd like you to speak about, and in particular with a focus on what are some of those practical tips that young parents can become aware of. It's just a matter of being aware of what they can do, what changes they can make in their routines and in their lifestyle to prevent trauma.
Yeah, that's very true, and it's very important sort of work that we are doing, which is why we launched the Pediatric Trauma Prevention Campaign last year with a specific focus that a lot of the injuries that we see that get admitted into hospital are completely preventable. And therefore, with the general public being aware of what are the things that they should or should not do and prevent their children from being injured and coming to hospital, I think that's well worth sort of a campaign to sort of pursue, which is the main aim of what we're doing. As I've repeatedly said during my presentation, both in the hospital, outside of the hospital, the whole aim of doing this campaign is to prevent or reduce the number of children with preventable injuries getting admitted into the hospital. So some of the things that we have done was to highlight specific pattern of injuries that we see throughout the year. For example, early last year during summer months, we see a lot of children being admitted from water-related injuries, including young people who are foolish enough sometimes to jump from the jetty into the water, which is clearly not advisable. And those sort of injuries are completely preventable. You don't do silly things, you're not going to get such horrible injury, which sometimes, for example, if you end up having a spinal cord injury, that could be a permanent, long-lasting injury, which nobody currently is able to sort of fix it.
I mean, I have two kids who are adults now, but my biggest fear always was, what if they come home with an injury, or what if, we are on the beach and something happens, and it is the biggest fear that us as parents have for our kids. And so this campaign is wonderful because it raises awareness about what is on the other side of the injury, what is the repercussion, the long-term impact on trauma and hurt that a family will go through. So I think knowing that will elevate the motivation of parents to become more aware. So quickly, before we go to the different campaigns and different sorts of injuries that you see, can we talk about where parents can actually see all the resources that you have so far been able to put together?
There are a lot of resources available online, which is what most people do nowadays, to seek some information. I would highly recommend specific website on pediatric trauma prevention. At the Women's and Children's Hospital trauma website, we have specific links that will direct you to where those resources are available. We are very proud when we were launching this campaign that we actually incorporate a lot of other agencies or experts in the field to actually collaborate with us. One of the important organization that I must highlight is what Kids Safe South Australia is doing, led by Holly Fitzgerald, the CEO. She is tirelessly campaigning to prevent children from getting injured constantly. And Kids Safe South Australia website are full of wonderful resources. A lot of the things that we've been doing last year in our media campaign was actually, highlighting a lot of things that they already tried to spread to the public.
So Kids Safe South Australia is probably one of the best resources that people can go on and learn about. So before we started recording, we were talking about some of the most common injuries that you see, and so they were water injuries or water incidents, drownings. We were talking about sporting incidents and concussions, burns, and also road crashes. So if we just go one by one and we talk about how we can become more aware and prevent some of these injuries. So starting with maybe sporting injuries and concussions, what are some of your learnings so far in that field?
So there's been a lot that's been said in the Sporting Commission of the country about not to ignore the seriousness of a concussed brain from sporting injury. In fact, a lot of sporting codes are now introducing sort of like strategies to sort of minimize the potential risk of damages that sustain from concussion that people probably in the past, I would say, routinely just ignore and said, just tough it out, you'll be fine.
Yes.
Unfortunately, what we are seeing, or there's evidence more and more clearly demonstrating that, children who have had a concussed brain following a sporting injury, for example, they've got more problems with being irritable, memory, losing concentration, not able to focus at their studies or work. All those are not insignificant. And we have certainly seen a number of these children needing a bit of a help from our brain injury unit or undergoing ongoing rehab, which sometimes, unfortunately, these symptoms can be long-lasting. We were very proud when we did our media release on concussion. We have Mark Bickley with his family attending to actually share some of the personal history of the child that got injured, which is in the public domain. And we're very pleased that we're able to get all these families to actually support our campaign throughout the year, which at this stage will be ongoing because there are a lot of other sort of preventable injuries that we want to highlight as well.
So, I mean, we live in Australia, and of course, Australian football is one of the more popular sports in this country, and it is a contact sport, and there's a lot of things that can happen as children play. What are some of the things, practical tips for parents who want their kid to play footy?
A head guard, especially if it's a high impact sort of sports. And if you do sustain a concussion, you should take a break. You shouldn't say, I'll tough it out, I'll just keep going. Because a lot of all this injury really require a bit of a rest and rehab. And quite often, unfortunately, we just think it's just a minor thing, just keep going. That shouldn't be the case. And a lot of the sporting codes are clearly highlighting this as an issue. In fact, I'm aware of nurses or health professionals who are now stationed at sporting grounds just to make sure that those advice are fully adhered, and whenever there's a child who sustained a concussion.
So it's a matter of a little bit of change of culture as well, that you know the protective gear is okay to use.
That's right.
You know, so you're not the only one with the helmet.
Exactly. It may not look so cool, but if it's going to be helping to prevent some of this serious injury from happening,
that's right.
And some of them truly can be very long lasting, and the impact, it's often underestimated.
It's interesting because, I mean, as a dentist, I know that, you know, like the devastating impact of dental injuries, you know, that's lifelong as well. And now, you know, the sports mouth guards are a part and parcel of any sports that you play in Australia. It's mandatory. Right. So maybe that's something that needs to happen, that the stigma of wearing a helmet or a protective gear should be removed. Just
like riding a push bike, it's legally required that you wear a helmet. But how often do we see riders not wearing helmet? In fact, that happens very frequently, I must say. Going
to water safety, summertime and Australia, and we love the water and the beaches and the pools, and so some of the things that you see. Some of them, I'm sure they're very devastating, but what do you see during your work? Jumping
from the jetty into the water, sustaining spinal cord injury or internal injury. We've seen quite a few, usually during the summer months, which is why we specifically wanted to raise the awareness during summer months. More recently, we did one at Unli swimming pool with the minister, highlighting the dangers of drowning, especially in young children. Obviously, it's legislated that you need to have a fenced swimming pool. But again, if they've got manual dexterity to open the gate, for example, if it's not high enough, which it should be high enough to stop children from opening the gate, in a split second of a few seconds, the child could easily drown. And we have seen a run of all these cases also at the Children's Hospital, which is very devastating, especially those that end up not surviving the drowning. It is absolutely heartbreaking for health workers to see families, parents coming into a hospital with their child who is not going to survive a drowning, because if you look back, you're going to say that was completely preventable. Those are the specific incidents that we are very keen to avoid seeing repeatedly. Unfortunately, sometimes it really takes a few seconds of inattention or not supervising, and then some serious injuries can occur. And unfortunately, sometimes it resulted in death of children, which is clearly very devastating to see.
And even if they survive the incident, the trauma of it, and the impact that it will have, would they also sustain any permanent physical injury from these incidents?
If the brain's been starved of oxygen for a prolonged period, you can certainly end up having some neurological problem following the injury. And again, we've seen quite a number of these cases, which is completely preventable, and hence very keen to sort of like make all your listener be aware that we shouldn't be leaving a child unsupervised at any time around a pool or along the river or in the ocean for that matter, because it is such a dangerous thing to do, especially if they are not supervised properly.
And even if the child has been going to swimming classes and the parents think that yes, they can swim, it's still important that they are supervised at all times.
Exactly.
It's, you know, the age of technology, and a lot of us are so distracted by our phones, and I think one of those things is that if you're supervising,
that's right,
you have to supervise, and you know, you just leave your phone somewhere else and 100% of attention.
That's absolutely right.
Cool. You talked about quad bikes, and I know quad bikes are a very, very scary thing for even, you know, adults. But I'm surprised that, you know, it comes in a child size kind of a...
It does. And when I say we, mention specifically the Royal Australasian College, have been advocating very strongly to get government organization to support banning children from riding quad bike. The reason why we have been saying this for such a long time is because as a pediatric surgeon, I have seen a number of children dying from riding quad bikes. The children do not have the manual dexterity or the physical strength to lift up a quad bike if they get trapped underneath. They are not stable, and this misnomer of calling them all-terrain vehicle are absolutely wrong, because they are not meant to be driven in any terrain. They are not stable, and when they flip, if a child gets trapped underneath, even a child-sized quad bike can weigh up to 100 and 150 kilograms. You cannot possibly expect a child to lift it up if he or she gets trapped underneath. And that was exactly what happened in New Zealand more than 10 years ago, if I remember correctly, of a child who was trapped under a child quad bike, and unfortunately he asphyxiated because his face was on a few centimeters of puddle of water, and that was the cause of death as reported by the coroner. And that was very, very sad to read. But as pediatric surgeon, just like all pediatric surgeons around the country and even the states, I would say, we've been advocating very strongly to stop children from being allowed to ride in quad bike. I'm not going to tell adults not riding the quad bike, but children, absolutely, they should not be near this sort of all-terrain vehicle, which, as I said, is a complete misnomer.
I mean, there's a reason why children don't drive a car.
That's right. That's right. You wouldn't trust me to sort of like, fly a plane without the license, without the appropriate training. And children, even though they're very keen, they're very, obviously it's very interesting to be excited to be able to drive a motorized vehicle, but they are just not suited to be riding a quad bike because they absolutely do not have the manual dexterity or the physical strength to lift them up if they do get trapped underneath.
It's just surprising that the laws around these have not yet changed.
There have been multiple coroner's reports from multiple states around the country which have suggested that should be done. Unfortunately, I'll say there's currently no political will to actually do that. And the industry is a very powerful industry. I probably shouldn't go into too many controversial areas, right. But this is an ongoing battle. We have a common saying, children and quad bike do not mix. And that's consistently our message that we've been putting out.
And you probably see injuries from riding bikes, or we can talk about, road crashes that you were saying that, sometimes we think that they're inevitable because there are so many drivers out there that are not careful, but we as parents have, control over the situation as well. Maybe we can explore that a little bit.
Sure. Once again, we wanted to focus on road crashes because as of it was just before Christmas on the advertiser, they've published an article to say children under 14, the biggest killer right now is road crashes. That was very devastating to read, and this is around the whole country. And in the work that I'm doing at the Women's and Children's Hospital, there have been many occasions over the last many years working there now that we see children come into hospital with non-survivable injury because they've been hit by a car, involved in road crashes because of a drunkard driving the vehicle, inattention, playing with the phone, answering calls and things like that. All these are completely preventable. And if I may share a personal sort of story about this as well. As a 12-year-old boy, I lost my best friend in a road crash because he was hit by a drunkard who shouldn't be behind the wheels. And that had a very significant impact on me because I get to see him in an open casket as a 12-year-old boy with his face completely swollen and smashed, unrecognizable. And thinking back, that was very scary, but at the same time, I was reflecting on if the driver was not drinking, wasn't drunk, wasn't behind the wheels, I could still have my best friend with me right now. But his life was lost, and that devastated his entire family, and the impact was long-standing. I will also go as far as to say, every one of your listeners, I'm sure knows someone who's been affected by road crashes. We are not going to call them road accidents, because accidents give this connotation, they are inevitable, it will happen. No, most of the road crashes that we see does not need to be inevitable. They are completely preventable if drivers or the public do the right thing.
And how do parents protect children? I mean, they have no control over the person who is using their phone in the car or, been drunk and decided to drive, but they have no control over that, but they have control over their child.
Sure.
What can they do?
I think as parents, all of us should be setting good example.
Yes.
Don't do the things that we ask other drivers not to do.
Yes.
So that our children will actually follow to do the right things.
Yes.
There have been lots and lots of campaign on media that we've seen, which highlighting what the problem would be if you are doing the wrong things and you're actually setting bad examples to the children. Sometimes I'll go as far as to say, doing simple things like, for example, what I did to some of my junior doctors crossing the junction, crossing the road, walking towards the hospital recently. There was not much traffic around the hospital at the time of the day. The pedestrian crossing light was still red, and there was a tendency for most of us to just walk across. I said to my fellow registrar at that time, no, you're not going to do it, not around the hospital, when there could be other children walking past, seeing that you just walk across the road when the light has not turned green.
Yes.
So these are simple things that I believe we, the general public, can do. So I would like to also very quickly relate a story. When I was in Hobart previously, I was standing beside a very senior surgeon, whom I will not name, but he's an absolutely nice guy that, I befriended with. And we were standing at the junction, and there were no traffic, and the lights were red. He looked at me, both of us standing at the junction. He said, why are we not crossing? I said, because we are not going to set bad examples to some of the children that's walking past us right now. And he just stared at me, and to be perfectly honest with you, you would not be able to generally ask this guy not to do certain things. I'm sure if not because of what I said, he would have just walked across the road and potentially showing bad example to young people who was walking around the hospital. And who knows, they may have done that in the future, and that could have resulted in them being hit by a car.
So setting examples for our own kids to become aware, not text walk, for example.
That's right. Yes.
Which is one of the things that we do, mindlessly we are answering a text and walking. And
it's really good as a parent, when I'm driving, I sometimes, not always, get told off by my son for saying, well, just make sure you stay at the speed limit. I am absolutely so happy to hear those things, because that is then telling me that some of the message that I've asked my son to make sure that put into practice and don't do the wrong thing, he's able to then tell me off when I'm speeding in a 50 zone, traveling at above 50. He will tell me off. I'm absolutely happy to be told off by my son when that happened.
And that goes with bike safety, I guess, as well, making sure that the helmets are worn.
Correct.
And anything else that people need to become aware of?
Recently with mountain bike, and there's a lot of mountain bike riders around the state. It's a very, very popular sport. We saw a spike of mountain bike riders getting themselves injured, and there were a few cases that resulted in spinal fracture. And it was a very touching sort of story that I heard recently during the media release. A young boy riding mountain bike got himself injured. He could have been permanently disabled if he had tried to move. His friend who was with him had being sensible, asked him, don't move, you lie on the ground, I'll go and get help. And we will confidently say that action has saved that boy's life from not being permanently disabled. Because if he had tried to move, injured, transected the spinal cord, that's it. But he had the right intention or with the right safety message to actually advise him, don't move. He went to get help. The paramedics came, retrieved him back to the children's hospital. He's now recovering, but he's not permanently disabled. So it was very heartwarming sort of occasion to hear stories like this. And that's the boy, his friend, being really, really sensible and potentially have saved his friend's life. Things like that, when we hear it, it's absolutely fabulous, because the flip side of the coin is this guy would have been permanently disabled in a wheelchair and not able to have bladder or bowel control for the rest of their life. And that would be absolutely devastating.
And the amazing thing is that friend knew.
Yes.
That, if he moves, something can happen.
I'm pretty
and it's
sure
just all about education. It's all about awareness.
Correct.
As to how we can lessen the impact when things like this happen.
I personally congratulate him for doing that. I think he got a commendation from the minister as well for doing such an amazing job to stop injuries from happening.
Wonderful. We've got a few minutes left. Let's talk about prevention of burns, because that's another thing that you see a lot of. That's
right. We're very proud that we collaborate with the burn service at the hospital. They've been doing this annually, a campaign, burns campaign, educate the public about safe first aid. We will encourage, if you sustain a burn, run it under water for 20 minutes, not ice water, but just water for up to 20 minutes to minimize the collateral damage from ongoing burn that we may sustain. We wanted to highlight the danger of campfires ground, because even though the fire is not burning anymore, it's incredibly hot. If you accidentally step on them, you will get significant burn to your feet. And that was a very successful campaign that was launched over the last couple of years. And we did that again last year, coinciding with the lifting of the total fire bans. And rest assured, with this upcoming sort of like long weekend over Easter, for example, when a lot of us will probably go for camping, doing campfires, setting up campfires to do our cooking and things like that, we will be highlighting that dangers again to the general public, and also what are the first aid measures that you can do. And highlighting that to the general public, we hope we'll actually get to see less and less of these preventable injuries from being admitted into hospital.
So I think, just to sum this up, from what I learned from you today, is that probably the most important thing for our young parents who are listening is become curious as to how or where you can learn about this. There's nothing wrong with enrolling in a first aid course. No. You become a parent, do your first aid course, because that might be, that information that you have can save your child's life or somebody else's child's life. And, it's this education and this awareness that is going to make a difference and lessen the burden on you guys, because, you are angels. You're doing so much for the community, and you've been tireless as to what you guys have been doing. But without the public's help, it's going to be a very, very difficult uphill battle.
Fully agree with you. I think all of us need to play our part to see our children growing up healthy, not getting themselves injured from preventable injuries, And if all of us play our part, help to spread the trauma prevention messaging to our loved ones, friends, colleagues, I think that would be fabulous. So to have this opportunity to do this, to target another group of South Australians who is listening to this, give me a lot of great sense of achievement, because what we've been doing over the last year or so, we have tried to spread this news as far as possible. But to have this opportunity today, I'm very grateful.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Rosh.